Senna's revenge crash 1990, Suzuka. Formula One's most sacred battleground, and Ayrton Senna wasn't here to race, he was here to finish a war. A year earlier, the same track had been the scene of what Senna considered the ultimate betrayal. Alain Prost, his teammate turned enemy, had slammed into him, ending Senna's race and his championship. The FIA backed Prost. Jean-Marie Balestre, the FIA president, a known Prost ally, sealed the verdict. Senna was disqualified, his win erased, his title stolen. Senna never forgot. For 365 days, that moment burned inside him. Every podium, every qualifying session, every interview, he replayed that crash over and over in his mind. Not as a defeat, but as a debt. And 1990 was his chance to collect. But this time, he wasn't going to wait for Prost to make the first move. The weekend started with Senna claiming pole position, but the FIA ruled that pole would start on the dirty side of the grid. A decision Senna furiously protested. He pleaded, demanded, but Balestre refused. Prost conveniently would start on the clean side. Senna saw through it. He wasn't just battling Prost anymore. He was fighting the FIA itself, and that's when something inside him changed. He told his race engineer quietly that night, if Prost leads into turn 1, he won't finish this race. That wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Race day, October 21st, 150,000 fans packed Suzuka. Millions more watched around the world. The championship would be decided here in one final battle. No one could predict what was about to happen. Senna sat silent on the grid. No prayers, no rituals, just focus. The red lights lit up. Prost's Ferrari edged slightly ahead. He moved across to defend the inside. Senna didn't blink. 160 miles per hour. He never lifted. In a fraction of a second, Senna's McLaren smashed into Prost's Ferrari. Not clipped. Not a racing incident. A direct hit. Carbon fiber exploded. Both cars launched off track. Debris raining across Suzuka's first corner. Both drivers out. Race over. Championship decided. And Senna, champion. The silence after the crash was deafening. Prost stormed away from the wreckage, disgusted. He refused to speak to Senna. He refused to speak to the press. The FIA officials stood frozen. They knew what had just happened. Everyone did, but no penalty came. No investigation, no sanctions. Senna, the man who'd been robbed by politics a year before, had just stolen the title back in the most brutal, undeniable way. And when the press finally cornered him in the garage hours later and asked the question everyone wanted answered, did you crash into Prost on purpose? Senna didn't evade. He didn't lie. He looked them in the eyes and said, yes, it wasn't racing anymore. It was justice. Because in Ayrton Senna's world, the rules never mattered. Only revenge. Schumacher's Adelaide crash. Adelaide, 1994, the final race of the season, the final battle for the title. Michael Schumacher stood on the brink of becoming world champion for the first time. Everything he'd worked for, every race he'd fought through, led to this moment. But there was a problem. His rival, Damon Hill. Hill had chased Schumacher all year. He was close. Too close. If Hill finished ahead in this race, the title was his, and Schumacher knew it. He also knew something else. In Formula One, you don't always win by being faster. Sometimes you win by being ruthless. The race began. Schumacher led. For 35 laps, he controlled it. But then, a mistake. On lap 36 at the East Terrace corner, Schumacher ran wide. His Benetton clipped the wall. His car bounced back onto the track, damaged, vulnerable. Hill saw his chance. Schumacher saw his too. In that split second, Michael made a decision. As Hill dived down the inside, Schumacher deliberately turned in. The damaged Benetton collided with Hill's Williams. Both cars smashed together. Schumacher's car launched into the barriers, race over. But Hill, his car kept moving for a few hundred meters until the true damage showed. Suspension destroyed, tire punctured, Hill pulled into the pits. Mechanics swarmed the car, but it was hopeless. Hill retired. Schumacher, world champion. By force. No celebrations, no handshakes, just stunned silence. The paddock knew what had happened. Everyone knew. But the FIA, they stayed quiet. No penalty, no investigation, nothing. Years later, footage confirmed what fans had suspected from the start. Schumacher's steering input wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. He had crashed to win. And just like that, Michael Schumacher's legend was born. Not as a clean champion, but as Formula One's ultimate win-at-any-cost driver. Adelaide wasn't the race where Schumacher proved his talent. It was the race where he proved he'd do anything to win. Even crash his rival out of history. Hamilton's Ligate Melbourne, 2009, the first race of the season, and Lewis Hamilton wasn't just chasing victory. He was about to orchestrate one of the biggest scandals of his career. This wasn't a driving error. This wasn't a technical breach. This was something far more deliberate, lying. It began in the closing laps of the Australian Grand Prix. A safety car period shuffled the field. Jarno Trulli, driving for Toyota, accidentally passed Hamilton behind the safety car after briefly going off track. By the rules, that was illegal. Hamilton was in position for a podium finish, but the confusion began after the race. Toyota argued that Hamilton had slowed unnaturally, causing Trulli to pass. Hamilton claimed otherwise. Both teams were summoned to the stewards. In that meeting, Hamilton, sitting beside his McLaren sporting director Dave Ryan, told FIA officials that he had not been instructed to let Trulli repass, that Trulli's pass was illegal. The stewards believed him. Hamilton was awarded third place. But there was a problem: the radio transcripts. Later that night, FIA investigators reviewed McLaren's team radio, and the truth was undeniable. Hamilton had been explicitly instructed by McLaren to let Trulli pass. His engineer had said the words, "Let him through, Lewis." The entire story Hamilton had told the stewards? A lie. A coordinated, deliberate lie. When FIA officials realized they had been deceived, they acted fast. The next morning, Hamilton and Dave Ryan were recalled to the steward's office. Confronted with the radio evidence, Hamilton broke. He admitted everything. McLaren had ordered him to lie, and he did. The fallout was instant. Hamilton was disqualified from the Australian Grand Prix, his third-place finish stripped, his trophy taken back. But the scandal didn't stop there. Dave Ryan, McLaren's sporting director and one of the team's longest-serving figures, was fired on the spot, publicly blamed for orchestrating the deception. Hamilton, just 24 years old, stood alone in front of the media, shaken. He delivered an emotional apology, tears in his eyes, claiming he was simply following orders, that he was a pawn in a bigger game. But the damage was done. For the first time in his career, Lewis Hamilton wasn't a rising hero. He was a liar. The FIA considered further sanctions against McLaren, already infamous after the 2007 Spygate scandal, but stopped short of expelling the team. The world watched as Hamilton, the defending world champion, became the centerpiece of Formula One's darkest deception scandal since Crashgate. Fans debated for years, was Hamilton a victim or was he fully complicit? All that mattered was the official record. In Australia 2009, Lewis Hamilton didn't lose a race. He lost his reputation, at least for a while. Piquet Sr.'s racist slur, 2022. Formula One's most successful black driver was fighting for his 8th world title. But far from the racetrack, a voice from the past surfaced, and it wasn't an opponent in a Ferrari or Red Bull. It was Nelson Piquet, 3-time world champion, Brazilian legend, and the man who, in a single sentence, destroyed his own legacy. The story begins in an interview filmed in 2021, shortly after the infamous British Grand Prix collision between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Piquet was asked for his opinion. Its analysis? Simple. He blamed Hamilton. But what should have been routine F1 banter turned into something darker. While recalling the incident, Piquet referred to Lewis Hamilton not by name, but with the word neguinho. In Brazilian Portuguese, it's not ambiguous, it's not playful, it's a racial slur. Piquet didn't say it once, he said it twice, casually, without hesitation, without a second thought. For months, that interview sat hidden in Brazilian media archives. Then in June 2022, someone uploaded the clip online. Within hours, Formula One exploded. The world heard what Piquet said, unfiltered, unapologetic, and they didn't forgive. Hamilton himself responded, tweeting, "It's more than language, these mindsets need to change." He didn't mention Piquet by name. He didn't need to. Mercedes issued a public statement condemning Piquet. The FIA followed. F1's governing bodies moved fast because they knew this wasn't just a tasteless joke. This was open racism from a man who had stood on top of their sport. Sponsors pulled out. Partners distanced themselves. Formula One made it official. Nelson Piquet was banned from the F1 paddock permanently. A man once celebrated as Brazil's motorsport icon, erased from the sport overnight. Piquet tried to defend himself, claimed the term was mistranslated, said it was harmless in his culture, but no one believed him because everyone inside F1 knew. Piquet had always been like this. He was a racer from the old world, brash, blunt, and now irrelevant. In one sentence, Nelson Piquet destroyed decades of respect, not through a crash, not through cheating, but through his own words. Words that ended his career not on the racetrack, but in the court of public opinion. For Piquet, the ban wasn't just a punishment, it was a sentence. Verstappen's physical assault 2018, Brazil, Interlagos, the place Max Verstappen had dominated all weekend. Fastest in practice, fastest in the race. A sure victory in the making. But in Formula One, nothing is guaranteed, not even for Max. With 44 laps completed, Verstappen led the Brazilian Grand Prix, controlling the pace, managing his tires, ready to add another win to his growing career. Then, as he approached backmarker Esteban Ocon, it all changed. Ocon, a lapped car, tried to unlap himself. Verstappen wasn't impressed. They collided. At the entry to turn 2, Ocon launched his Force India down the inside. Verstappen, leading the race, turned in, not expecting a challenge from a lapped car. Their tires touched. Ocon spun. Verstappen spun. And just like that, his race was ruined. From dominant leader to second place. He crossed the line, fists clenched, face like stone. His radio was silent. Not because he didn't have anything to say, but because if he spoke, he'd be penalized. But Verstappen wasn't finished. After parking his car in Parc Fermé, he didn't walk towards the podium room. He walked straight to Ocon. Cameras captured it live. In front of FIA officials, team principals, and journalists, Max Verstappen physically shoved Esteban Ocon once, twice, 3 times in the chest. Ocon's face said everything. He knew he couldn't retaliate. Max kept coming. His Red Bull crew pulled him back, but Verstappen wasn't interested in calming down. He had one message to deliver. You don't mess with this race. The FIA summoned him immediately. Physical assault inside a restricted FIA area. In Formula One, heated exchanges are common, but physical contact? That crosses the line. The verdict came quickly. Verstappen was officially found guilty of physical misconduct under Article 12.1.1.c of the FIA International Sporting Code. His punishment? 2 days of public service for the FIA. But what does that mean? It meant Verstappen had to work alongside FIA officials at a Formula E race, serving as a glorified volunteer, helping stewards with logistics and learning sportsmanship. Max accepted the penalty without apology. When asked if he regretted pushing Ocon, his answer was simple. If I could do it again, I would. For Verstappen, that wasn't a punishment. It was worth it, because in his mind, losing that win wasn't a racing incident. It was theft, and he settled it the way he knew best, not with words, but with his hands. Jarno Trulli's fraud conviction, 2017, Italy. For most fans, Jarno Trulli had disappeared from Formula One's spotlight years earlier. A veteran known for one-lap magic and nothing nothing more. But in a quiet Italian courtroom, far from any circuit, Trulli faced a scandal darker than anything from his racing career. Not a crash, not a sporting controversy, fraud. This wasn't about racing contracts or sponsorship disputes. This was about millions of euros. Investors cheated, partners betrayed, and a business empire built on lies. At the center of it all, Trulli's clean-cut, polite image. The world saw a retired racer, but behind closed doors, Trulli was selling a fantasy. It started with Trulli GP Energy, a renewable energy company launched after his F1 retirement. The pitch? Solar power plants, cutting-edge technology, green energy solutions backed by a Formula One icon. Investors lined up. Italian businessmen poured in funds. Contracts were signed. Entire solar farm projects were launched across Italy. But there was a problem. None of it existed. In 2014, investigators found that the company's flagship solar farm, supposedly built in Abruzzo, was just an empty field. No panels, no equipment, nothing but dust. Money that was supposed to fund construction? Gone. And when authorities dug deeper, they found the financial records. Millions of euros had been rerouted through fake companies, offshore accounts, payments for consulting fees to businesses registered to Trulli's closest associates. Money trail after money trail, all leading back to the driver who once stood on Formula One podiums. By 2015, prosecutors indicted Trulli and two business partners for commercial fraud and embezzlement. The charges were serious. Courtroom testimonies revealed Trulli's direct involvement in signing false contracts, presenting forged documents, and misleading financial backers. The numbers were brutal. Over 7 million euros defrauded. Investors lost their life savings. Families were ruined. In 2017, Jarno Trulli, the former Grand Prix winner, was officially convicted of commercial fraud by an Italian court. His punishment? A fine and a suspended sentence. No prison time. Why? His lawyers argued Trulli's clean reputation and unintentional mismanagement deserved leniency. The court agreed, but the victims didn't. They called him a con man in a racing suit, a fraud hiding behind a helmet. When reporters approached Trulli for comment outside the courthouse, he said just one thing: it was only business, and then he disappeared. From Formula One, from media, from public life. Jarno Trulli, the driver known for speed, had finally crashed into the truth. James Hunt's cocaine addiction. James Hunt wasn't just a Formula One driver. In the 1970s, he was F1's wildcard, a man who treated Grand Prix weekends the same way he treated nightclubs, as places to chase speed, women, and anything that burned. And for James Hunt, nothing burned hotter than cocaine. His addiction wasn't a rumor. It wasn't paddock gossip. It was a known fact. In the years leading up to his 1976 championship, Hunt's reputation was already carved in stone. He'd party until sunrise, turn up hungover, climb into the car, and still put it on pole. The media called him the Shunt, a nickname earned both from crashes and the chaos of his personal life. But behind the headlines, his cocaine habits spiraled. Former McLaren mechanics years later described mornings where Hunt arrived wearing last night's clothes, reeking of alcohol and still wired from a cocktail of stimulants. He'd disappear into the motorhome. Minutes later, he'd emerge, sunglasses on, pupils dilated, and ready to race. His ritual wasn't superstition, it was substance. Cocaine gave Hunt the edge, or so he believed. What made Hunt terrifying wasn't just his addiction. It was that it didn't seem to slow him down. At circuits like Monaco and Zandvoort, team insiders claimed his pre-qualifying warm-up wasn't stretching or strategy meetings. It was a line of coke. Journalists never dared to publish it. Sponsors knew, but turned a blind eye. Because Hunt wasn't just winning races, he was selling Formula One to the world. He was the rock star driver who lived fast, loved faster, and didn't care who knew it. There were no failed drug tests. Not because he didn't fail them, but because they weren't conducted. FIA medical director Sid Watkins later admitted that random drug tests weren't introduced until the 1980s. In the 70s, it was easier not to ask questions, especially when the questions could ruin F1's most marketable star. Team principal Teddy Mayer famously said, "If I banned James for drugs, I'd have no driver on Sunday." But the cracks began to show. The 1976 Dutch Grand Prix, Hunt reportedly collapsed in the garage before qualifying. Not from exhaustion, from overdose. A team mechanic revived him with cold water and black coffee. He then qualified fourth. His win at the 1976 Japanese Grand Prix, the title-clinching race, came after a week-long bender in Tokyo's underground clubs. Witnesses claimed Hunt arrived at the circuit still coming down from a cocaine binge. When he crossed the finish line and claimed the title, McLaren's team radio was silent. Not in celebration, but in relief, because no one believed he'd survive the season. After his championship, Hunt's addiction deepened. His marriage crumbled. His finances collapsed. He sold trophies to pay debts. His cocaine use moved from a weekend vice to a daily dependency. In 1979, Hunt retired. In 1993, he died of a heart attack. Autopsy reports found extensive cardiovascular damage. Years of cocaine abuse, masked by fame and speed, had destroyed his heart long before it stopped beating. James Hunt didn't die a world champion. He died a cautionary tale, a man who lived faster than anyone until even his body couldn't keep up.